Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week so you can learn how to prepare for this upcoming crisis, because in every crisis, there's an opportunity to make a lot of money. But we do have something interesting this week outside of the absolute collapse of all the stock markets. We have UK banks changing their terms and conditions, saying basically that they could just not allow you to withdraw your money if there is a financial instability at their institution. Let's go ahead and get started. Biggest news of the week was when FedEx announced a change in their guidance. Basically, they were saying that they see a global recession on the horizon and they're not going to be able to make as much money as they did before. That brought absolutely everything down. FedEx is one of those harbinger stocks where it kind of precedes what is actually going to happen, because obviously everybody uses a shipping company, right? So if there's less shipping, obviously that tells you a lot about what's going to happen. And if FedEx expects less shipping in the future, which is what they basically advised by bringing down their guidance, obviously that's a very bad sign for the economy. Their shares are down over 21% so far this year. Electrolux, which is the second largest appliance maker in the world, is shutting down production lines. So a lot less people buying things for their home. Again, consumer demand. You and I spending money is the absolute biggest percentage of the economy in most of the economies around the world. In the United States, it's close to about 70%, 70. Shipping cargo demand is imploding as the consumer demand plummets. German toilet paper company has just filed for bankruptcy, and they can't make enough toilet paper due to the rising costs of energy. Remember that we talked about the aluminum factories and these other factories that were closing down. I mean, we're walking into a really big problem. Goldman Sachs is warning about another 27% drop in the S&P 500 could be coming if the inflation hawks are right. And overall for the week, U.S. stocks super negative, including Canada. European markets mostly lower as well, with the DAX, the Swiss, and the Istanbul markets being the most negative of all. Latin America, again, mostly lower. Middle East and Africa also mostly lower. South Africa, most negative of all at 3.19%. And then in the far east, we have Shanghai being the most negative at 4.33%. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news. Ethereum has completed their merge on Thursday. Most of you I know still don't invest in cryptos. Kind of an overall view. It basically involves using a lot less energy and being a lot more efficient, meaning they can process more transactions for less. And an arrest warrant has been issued for Do Kwon creator Terra and Luna in South Korea. If you guys remember, that was the stable coin and also the crypto that just went to zero. And he made billions of dollars and then it just went bankrupt. But don't forget, crypto's the future. Yeah, don't forget, Bitcoin's the future. Bitcoin lower this week, down 7.34%. I didn't write down exactly the price that it was in, but it was hovering, I think, around 20,000. Next week, I'll make sure I get the number for you guys. For the commodities, the Biden administration is now considering replenishing the U.S. strategic oil reserve when oil dips below $80 a barrel. Remember that about 2 years ago with the previous president, they blocked him, the Democrats, from filling the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, at $24 a barrel. And Biden has been ordering the release of the reserve to, quote unquote, help consumers, right? And remember that he was selling part of that to China. China. Oh, is it? Again, my impersonation is horrible. U.S. crude and Brent are both down almost 2%. Obviously, this is a combination with the dollar being super strong because of the interest rates and also because of the fear. And in addition to that, we have an expectation of a lot lower demand. So if we're going to have a lot lower demand, that means a lot less people using oil, which means oil going down. Gold went down 2.45%, 1,676, and silver went up by over 4%, 1970. Financial and banking news. Total U.S. debt reaches $31 trillion. And this is kind of the cat in the hat, because they're only going to be able to raise interest rates for so long until we can't literally afford to pay our debt anymore because of the amount of money that we're paying on interest. Remember that now the interest rates literally have doubled. So now the interest on the debt that we're paying in the United States, which is the 31 trillion, which is a new record, is going to double too. So we're in this catch-22 position where they're going to keep raising to bring inflation down, which is going to bankrupt us, but they can't continue raising, and eventually they're going to have to bring it back down, which means that inflation is still going to get out of control, which means we're going to go bankrupt anyway. So that's why things are going to get bad. But remember, you can always make money in a crisis. U.S. inflation was higher than expected at 8.3%. U.S. grocery prices went up 13.5% year over year. Mortgage rates have hit 6% for the first time since 2008, which is more than twice the level from a year ago, while applications for mortgages are down to its lowest level since 1999. New home sales plunged to a 6.5-year low, and home resales in single-family housing are at 2-year lows. Now, remember, the housing industry is about 17% of the U.S. economy, which means that if that's going to the toilet, we're all going, it's going to be fine. The UK inflation slowed in August, but it's still very high, 9.9%. European inflation overall is at a record high, 9.1%. And the British pound is now at its lowest rate since 1985. It just went below 1.14. So if you're planning a vacation, you might want to think about going to Europe soon. There's been a combination of the dollar strength in addition to the absolute disaster that the economy in the UK is in. So much so that now India has overtaken the UK as the 5th largest economy in the world. It's now US, China, Japan, Germany, and then India, followed by the UK. And in the absolutely is nothing is wrong news this week, the UK banks have now changed their account terms to limit withdrawals in case any withdrawals, quote, may affect their financial stability. Put simply, if there's a bunch of people that are nervous and they go to take their money out of the bank, they can literally just stop it because it might cause an instability at the bank. Really convenient time to be doing that, but nothing to see here. Everything's fine. Don't worry. Everything's fine. Total consumer debt rose $23.8 billion in July. It's now at a record at $4.6 trillion. Consumer credit grew at over $30 billion a month through the first 7 months out of the year. This basically means that, consumers, which again is almost 70% of the U.S. economy, they're just getting hit from every angle. And because they can't afford their bills anymore, they're going out and buying everything with their credit cards. What's going to happen when people just can't afford to buy food anymore if they're maxed out their credit cards, for example? Revolving debt now is above the pre-pandemic level at $1.1 trillion. And both headline and core retail sales, which are basically consumers buying stuff at stores, they both are starting to slow significantly, while gas stations saw sales tumble 4.2%. So things are starting to decelerate very, very fast. In political news, Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson has conceded defeat in the elections, with the far right winning in Sweden. In economic news, China is starting to see trouble as well. They've always seen their exporters as a huge part of their economy, but last year it was at 20%. This year now it's between 30 to 40%, and they've always been able to rely on that due to the fact that obviously everybody makes their stuff in China, right? But now due to the slumping demand overseas, the economy is not doing well. People are buying a lot less stuff. They're starting to economize. They're starting to shed their workers, and factories are starting to close and even rent out some of their spaces. Exports, remember, about 30 to 40% of the GDP in China, so even they're getting hit as well. Corporate news, shares of Bed Bath & Beyond fell by over 8%. They announced that they're going to close about 150 stores, or close to 20%. Trade news, Uzbekistan has signed an agreement with China and Russia, almost at about $20.6 billion, everything from machinery to chemicals and geological sectors. We have the situation where because the U.S. has weaponized the dollar, a lot of other countries are now starting to see, wait a second, I don't want to be in the situation that Russia is in. They're starting to make their own agreements instead of going through the United States. So we're starting to live in a multipolar world, which I don't know we're going to like very much. Technology, scientists have shown that Mars contains evidence of ancient lakes that existed billions of years ago. And there's a geologist from the University of Hong Kong that is proposing that scientists may have been dramatically underestimating the number of ancient marshes and lakes that once existed. Investment news Thursday, there was an agreement to avert the potential rail shutdown between the unions and the workers, and the unions and the railroad companies, that would have disrupted the cargo and the supply chains quite a bit, reaching almost $2 billion a day. But luckily, we got to an agreement. And in international events, fighting erupted again between Armenia and also Azerbaijan. Supposedly, they're in a truce after 2 days, and Russia still has 2,000 peacekeepers there that brokered the deal, between the two countries that ended the fighting in 2020. Huge storm over Alaska, biggest in over a decade. It's the remnants of Typhoon Merbok. A typhoon in Asia is essentially a hurricane for the U.S., just so you know. And its capability of generating major flooding, storm surge, 50-foot waves, 50 meters, and hurricane force winds. So I got some of you guys that listen in Alaska, so just keep safe out there. And unusual facts, new survey found near 4 out of 5 refugees that are now living in Sweden, or about 79% of them, went vacationing in the country where they, quote unquote, were fleeing persecution. Now, this doesn't have any consequences in Sweden, but if anybody that seeks asylum in Germany or Switzerland decides to go vacation in the country they're supposedly in danger of, they have a threat of actually losing their asylum. Euro glaciers, this is actually pretty important. Euro glaciers have been shrinking for decades and are now experiencing their most severe melting on record. The glaciers are starting to melt 1 to 2 months faster than normal. And this is a really big deal because glaciers give up about 90% of the water to lowland Europe for drinking, irrigation for food growth, and also hydropower. So if they're running out of water, that's going to be another emergency that's going to happen in Europe outside of the energy crisis and the economic crisis that they're walking into. The Alps also attracts 120 million people. So obviously tourism, which is one of the biggest percentages of the economy there in Europe as well. Obviously most of the most visited countries in the world are in Europe. It's going to be a big hit as well. Also, in the irony of the outdoor apparel maker Patagonia, quote unquote, giving away his company for $3 billion to, quote unquote, save the world, save the climate. He essentially created a structured deal to be able to help his family keep control of Patagonia, the company, of course. And also, here we go, shielding him from tax bills that could have totaled $700 million. So it's not about saving the environment. It's about saving taxes. Gautam Adani, which is the Indian tycoon, now surpassing Jeff Bezos as the world's second richest man at $146.8 billion, just behind Elon Musk at about $264 billion. And obviously, a lot of the stocks in his companies have gone up over 1,000% since 2020, which is the reason why he's going up on the ranks. And billionaires this week lost a ton of money. I'm just going to read this off because I thought that was really interesting. Jeff Bezos lost $9.8 billion. Elon Musk, $8.4. Mark Zuckerberg, $4 billion. Warren Buffett, $3.4. And Bill Gates, $2.8 billion with the huge crash that we saw on Tuesday. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. Actually, not a lot of news this week. We only have 13 minutes. But remember, the preppers were right.